of grace, the journey to the city of refuge. As the tribes of Israel finally began to settle within the hills and valleys of the Promised Land, a sacred tension hung in the air before the tabernacle at Shiloh. Joshua, the silver-haired leader, stood with Eleazar the high priest, their eyes scanning a vast parchment map of the territories. Though the land had been divided, a final, vital piece of the mosaic of justice and mercy remained. With a voice seasoned by years of command, Joshua declared the divine decree. They were to set apart holy sanctuaries, cities of refuge. These were not merely towns of stone, but beacons of hope where those who had caused an accidental death could find safety from the hand of the avenger. It was an act of carving the very heart of God's compassion into the geography of the nation. Far to the north, in the dappled shadows of a Galilean forest, tragedy struck a young man named Jotham. While he was clearing timber, the iron head of his axe suddenly flew from its wooden handle, striking his companion with fatal force. In an instant, his world shattered. There was no way to prove his innocence in the heat of the moment, and he knew the avenger of blood would soon be on his trail to demand a life for a life. Fear, cold and sharp, gripped his heart. Jotham began to run, his breath coming in ragged gasps as he scrambled over limestone ridges. His mind was fixed on one singular goal, the city of Kadesh, the holy sanctuary in the mountains of Naphtali. As the sun dipped toward the great sea, casting long, bruised shadows, Jotham reached the massive limestone gates of Kadesh. An elder named Amos, who kept watch at the entrance, stepped forward to intercept the frantic traveler. Jotham collapsed onto the flagstones of the gate square, his voice trembling as he recounted the terrible accident. Amos listened with a stillness that commanded respect, searching Jotham's eyes for the stain of malice, but finding only the deep wells of grief and regret. Placing a steadying hand on Jotham's shoulder, Amos signaled for the gates to open. As Jotham stepped across the threshold, he felt the suffocating shadow of the pursuer finally lift. Life within the walls of refuge was safe, yet it was a life of exile. Jotham lived and worked among the Levites, unable to return to his family home. He was bound to the city until the passing of the current high priest, the only event that could legally provide a full atonement and release. Years turned into seasons until one afternoon, a young messenger named Asaph arrived at the city square, his face flushed from the journey. He bore a message for Jotham. Eleazar the high priest had been gathered to his ancestors. The death of the priest had broken the bond of the law. Jotham's debt was settled, and he was now free to walk the roads of Israel without fear. Across the land, 6 cities stood strategically placed so that no person was more than a day's journey from mercy. Joshua stood upon a high ridge, looking out over the Jordan Valley, contemplating the grace that flowed through these designated hills. The roads to these cities were kept wide and clear, the gates never barred against the weary. Joshua realized that these sanctuaries were more than just a legal provision. They were a living shadow of a greater Savior to come, a place where every soul burdened by mistakes could find a resting place. He bowed his head in a prayer of gratitude, seeing the landscape not just as a map of tribes, but as a map of God's protective love.